hit my Cash App. That's what I care about more than anything. Hit that damn Cash App. Hit that Patreon. Okay, so I'm dying to ask you, and Angie, maybe you watch the show too. Have you watched the new Frasier? It's out. We bonded when I was tentatively gonna go to Seattle with this radio duo. This is where my bias for them is. I got into all things Seattle. I was like, 10 things I hate about you, right? 10 things I hate about you.
Yeah.
I'm just like all like I watch what's the Seattle Fire show called? What is that called?
Fire show.
The Grey's Anatomy spinoff. It's called. It's something.
Oh yes. But I don't know what it's called. But yes.
I was gonna say I now never miss an episode, but yet I can't think of the name. But I got into all things Seattle, and one time we were talking either on Instagram or on like the email or whatever, or some of our meetings that we had, and I got so into Frasier when I had not been into Frasier ever in life. But I always loved Cheers. And then you told me you guys also like Frasier. Have you started watching the new version where he's back to Boston?
So start the clock. I'm going to go for about 5 minutes here. First of all,
let me give you your close-up.
10 things I hate about you. I want to address this because that was filmed at Stadium High School in Tacoma, which Stadium High School's stadium you'll see in that movie is right on the water, and it's beautiful. Just 2 weeks or so ago, it was when I was on my cruise. I'm so bummed I found out about this after the fact. They did a screening of 10 Things I Hate About You on the field at Stadium High School in Tacoma. Yes.
I did not know about this. 10 Things I Hate About You was like the most formative movie for me when I was growing up. I mean, obsessed. I still watch it all the time. Yeah, I can't believe I missed that.
Yeah, me too. They did a screening on the field where that movie took place, where Heath Ledger did the whole
can't take my eyes off of you. Yeah.
And so bummed that I missed out on that. Now let's talk about Frasier. So Frasier was the spinoff of the TV show Cheers. Both of those shows went for 11 years. Frasier started in 1993, ended in 2004, which was nearly 20 years ago. I don't know if you know this. My wife Stacy and I went down to Los Angeles in April, and we saw a taping of the new Frasier. So we actually got to be there in person for episode 6, which has not been released yet. And when we went to see episode 6, they showed us the first episode to get us caught up, and then we watched them film episode 6. Now, I will say this: if you're a fan of the original Frasier, I think you have to give them a little bit of. I think sometimes when there are reboots or spinoffs, people are just wanting what they had in the past. And the reality is that's not going to happen. There are people who are mad that David Hyde Pierce is not there to play Niles and that Dean Leaves is not there to play Daphne. But the premise of the show is that Frasier is moving back to Boston and rebuilding his relationship with his son. And when you think in a real life way, it would be weird for just the whole family to pack up and go to Boston so that Frasier can work on his relationship with his son. And so you don't necessarily see all those people. There are going to be some cameos, but not everybody's going to appear. I think that they did a great job with it. You also got to take into consideration, and you got to give Kelsey Grammer a little bit of grace, because this is a 68-year-old guy playing a character that in the 1990s, when he was in his 40s, essentially, was very energetic, over the top character. But you know what? I think by the time I'm 68, I'm going to slow down a little bit too. And so, you got to give that a little bit of grace and maybe give it a little bit of time. But I think that it's really good, and I really enjoyed the Frasier reboot.
And you're caught up now.
Yeah, I'm all caught up.
I'm with you. I am caught up, and I'll be watching every week. Yeah, I've seen the first 2 episodes is what they released. Yeah. And I was more of a Cheers fan as a kid. Like, that's what we watched every week. Yeah. When it was the finale, like I was like sitting on the carpet, looking at the big TV, a little like 7 or 8-year-old, your hands like this, just looking up. I was mesmerized by what Cheers was, which was really funny, because as you grow up, you're like, that was about a bar. Yeah. you didn't realize, because there was so much like human like interaction and story and being there for each other. Frasier, however, maybe it's just I was growing up, I didn't really connect with right away. It was up until we all started talking about Seattle radio, and if I were to join on some level with you guys, that I was like became like the Seattle guy. Like I wanted to know everything, and I was like, oh my God, Frasier's amazing. So to your point of like, does it still hold up? I think it holds up in a really cool way. Like there was a joke he made where he's like, because refined Frasier, the Seattle show for all those years, and then he says something like, I don't know what it is about this city that I always want to just drink a cold beer. Meaning he was not a beer drinker in the Seattle version of Frasier, but then he's back to Cheers land or Boston land. It's just those little jokes are good for me. I like it. Yeah.
And he even said in the new Frasier, he said, last time I lived in Boston, I spent a little too much time at a certain bar.
Yeah, those are good for us. Yeah.
Yeah, which is a fun nod to Cheers, which that show, I mean, that's so long ago. And you're right. Cheers is a show that I know as a little kid, because I was born in 86, probably a few years into Cheers, but as a little kid, that theme song, which is it's Gary Portney. I think the title is "Everybody Knows Your Name" or "Where Everybody Knows Your Name." But that, like, because it was at such a influential age, like that's just stuck in my head. And so and like the picture of the bar and the "Where Everybody Knows Your Name," and it's very much like a comfort food for probably a lot of people of our generation. And I think also in the 1990s, if you're in elementary, middle, even high school, Frasier was not your show, because that was a show for adults. That was adult humor. They were pretentious, and that was I think we were all friends.
Wait, you're saying what I was? Oh, you love Frasier.
I watched Frasier in its original run, and then you got into it when you were an adult.
I didn't get Frasier at all.
But I agree with Angie.
I was always surprised at what I did understand at that age. I should watch it now, because probably I would understand more. I don't claim to think that I was so refined as a child, but I loved Frasier back then. I want to rewatch the whole thing and then watch the reboot.
Oh, the only other thing I'll add about Frasier when I was a kid, the one thing that I liked was Daphne. She was British and quirky and cute, and so that caught my eye. But everything about Frasier when I was a kid, I was not interested in. And then when I watched it as an adult, I was like, "Oh, this is hilarious!" And
it's so good. And maybe, Ange, like you said, you jumped in watching Frasier, maybe didn't even have the reference point of Cheers as much. But I'm agreeing with Moog a little bit, where it's like, yeah, if you were a Cheers fan, you were like, you were getting older and you were a teenager, and teenager is more of a rebellious time, so Frasier, Crane, Dr. Crane, it didn't work. But now I'm like, I'm such a Frasier, like I'm as neurotic as they come. So it's always so funny, different times in your life when you watch a show. When I was younger, we'll switch for a second. Sex and the City, you would have never had me liking, what's the pretentious one's name? Charlotte, right? Charlotte.
Oh, I love Charlotte. Yeah.
I was a stick in the mud Miranda all my life. Now let me tell you, the refined wannabe that I am, I'm such a Charlotte in my head, so it does change.
I was watching Sex and the City when I probably shouldn't have been. I think I was in 6th grade when I saw the episode about the funky spunk, and it was like, I shouldn't know about this.
Too
I
soon.
always felt like I was a mix between Samantha and Charlotte.
Mm-hmm.
So like, I wanted to be a slutty slut, but I only wanted it to be for my husband. You know what I mean? Like,
okay.
Of the two. But I feel like now I appreciate Miranda more now that I'm an adult.
Yeah. Do you guys have any, as we were sort of talking about like Frasier and even the other Seattle, the movie 10 Things I Hate About You, is there any other encompassing like Seattle stories that you guys want to share in terms of what makes it such a wonderful city?
You know what I love most about Seattle is I love this time of year. I think the thing that people dislike about Seattle is that once you hit like October, November, it turns gray and it stays that way until like March. And then there's amazing summers in Seattle. You can't beat it. I, as a kid who grew up in Las Vegas, a kid who grew up in the desert, for me, it was always novelty when it would rain. And so I love rainy days. Like, I can't get enough of it. So it could rain for 180 days straight, and I'd be like, "Ooh, look, it's raining." Other people, my wife doesn't love the constant gray so much. She really loves it here in Seattle, but she doesn't necessarily love the gray or the rain. But I love the rain. And also the rain is how we pay for all the beautiful greenery that we have in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, I grew up in the desert too. And so it's been nice having seasons. Yeah. Like, and the fall colors. But I don't live in Seattle. You're in West Seattle. I live in Kirkland, which is like suburb, I guess.
Yeah.
And what I like is the sense of community that I have here that I never felt like I had in Vegas. And in Vegas, it always felt like everything was so spread out and you didn't know your neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, and I moved around a lot in Vegas. So it wasn't like just in my neighborhood, nobody knew. It just felt like everywhere I went, there just wasn't that like connection. And where I live now, I feel like there's such a big sense of community. And then when I talk to people from different parts of the state, I feel like they always tell me stories about like, oh, and then we went to this camp when we were little and and everybody knows each other, and I didn't have that in Vegas, and it's nice to have that here, and for my children to have that, because they're like, when we lived in Vegas, we didn't have any friends, like but this was, because they're losers though. No, that's not right. Like here, it's like, oh, because everybody like knows each other and everybody, it feels like having that childhood, like when you were little and you would go outside and play with your friends and not come back inside until the street lights or whatever. It feels like my kids have that here. And that's exciting.
Yeah. I mean, I've told you guys, I like cities. I like bustling cities. I always tell you guys that New York is like my heart, you know? I grew up in Southern California, but New York always feels the best. But when I looked at Seattle as a potential place to go, I was like, this is really a version of that, you know, like the San Franciscos, you know, these big cities or whatnot. But yeah, it's very cool to look at. Okay, shifting gears. Moog and Angie, you can catch their podcast all the time. They are more consistent than me.
Hey, Ronnie Jr.